The silent thread. Why empathy built civilizations. Imagine a world where no one understood your pain. No one cared. No one even tried. Survival would be brutal. Every man for himself. Trust impossible. Progress unthinkable. Yet here we are, bound by something invisible but unbreakable. Empathy. This isn't just about feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is the bridge between souls, the quiet force that lets us step into another's shoes and see the world through their eyes. Without it, laws would be hollow, art meaningless, love just a transaction. The ancients knew this. Confucius taught that compassion was the root of harmony, not rules, not power, but the simple act of treating others as you'd wish to be treated. Thousands of years later, his words still echo because they're wired into our very survival. But empathy isn't soft. It's the sharpest tool we have. The Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, saw it as a discipline, a way to cut through illusion and recognize that every person fights battles we can't see. To dismiss their pain is to ignore reality itself. And yet, here's the twist. Empathy without discernment is a storm without a rudder. Buddha preached compassion, but also wisdom, knowing when to help and when to step back. Because understanding others starts with understanding yourself. This is the paradox. Empathy makes us human, but it's the balance of self-compassion and prudence that keeps us from drowning in the tides of others' suffering. The philosophers argued, the empires rose and fell, but one truth remained. Civilization doesn't grow from stone or steel. It grows from the courage to feel. So why does this matter now? Because in a world of division, empathy is the rebellion we need. Not weakness, strength, not noise, connection. And it all begins with a single radical act, choosing to see someone else as real. The mirror of the soul, philosophers on seeing yourself in others. Look into another person's eyes. What do you see? A stranger, an obstacle, or a reflection of yourself? The greatest thinkers in history have wrestled with this question, and their answers reveal a startling truth. Empathy isn't just kindness, it's recognition. Aristotle called humans social animals, not because we gather in crowds, but because we recognize ourselves in each other. When you feel another's joy or sorrow, it's not charity, it's kinship. The 18th century philosopher David Hume took this further. He argued that empathy is the glue of society, a natural instinct as vital as breathing. Without it, justice would be impossible, because fairness requires seeing others as equals. But here's where it gets profound. Friedrich Nietzsche, often misunderstood as cold, warned against pity, but championed something deeper. Understanding to truly empathize, he said, is to acknowledge another's struggle without reducing them to a victim. It's respect, not rescue. Then there's Martin Buber, who wrote that every meaningful human connection begins with two words: you matter. His philosophy wasn't about grand gestures. It was about the quiet moments when we stop seeing people as tools or obstacles, and instead as living, breathing worlds of their own. Yet empathy has a shadow. Jean-Jacques Rousseau saw it as the root of both virtue and vice. Feel too much, and you lose yourself. Feel too little, and you lose your humanity. The balance? Self-compassion. You can't pour from an empty cup. The Buddhist concept of metta, loving kindness, starts with the self, because only those at peace with themselves can truly hold space for others. This is the mirror philosophers hold up to us. To see another person clearly, you must first see yourself, not as separate, but as part of the same vast, fragile web. Every act of understanding ripples outward, bending the arc of history toward connection. So the next time you meet someone, ask, what version of myself do I see in them? The answer might just change everything. The double-edged sword. Empathy without discernment. Empathy can be a superpower or a trap. It lights the way to connection, but without boundaries, it burns you out. The ancient Greeks knew this. They carved the words, "Know thyself," at Delphi, not as a suggestion, but a warning. To understand others, you must first guard your own soul. Take Rousseau's dilemma. He believed empathy was the seed of morality, but he also saw its danger, losing yourself in others' pain until you can't tell where their suffering ends and yours begins. This isn't compassion, it's self-erasure. Even the Dalai Lama, a champion of compassion, teaches that wisdom means knowing when to say, "I cannot carry this for you." Prudence is empathy's silent partner. The Roman philosopher Seneca put it bluntly, "No one can swim for another. You can throw a lifeline, but you drown if you jump into every storm." Modern psychology calls this empathic distress, the cost of feeling too much without the tools to cope. But here's the twist. Discernment doesn't mean detachment. The Stoic Epictetus taught that true empathy requires clarity, not coldness. You can hold space for someone's pain without letting it consume you. Like a surgeon, you steady your hands, not because you don't care, but because you care enough to stay effective. And then there's Nietzsche's razor. He warned against bleeding for everyone, not because empathy is weak, but because blind compassion can rob others of their strength. Sometimes, the most empathetic act is to step back and let someone fight their own battles. This is the tightrope. Too little empathy, and the world turns to ice. Too much, and you melt into nothing. The answer? Balance, the Buddhist middle way. Not indifference, not overwhelm, but the sharp, quiet art of knowing when to lean in and when to let go. So here's the challenge. Love fiercely, but wisely. Feel deeply, but don't disappear. Because the world doesn't need martyrs. It needs people who can stand in the fire without burning out. That's how empathy changes everything. Not by losing yourself, but by finding the line where your heart meets your wisdom. The forgotten art. Self-compassion as the root of understanding. We spend so much time learning to care for others that we forget the first rule of kindness. You can't give what you don't have. The ancient philosophers knew this secret. Self-compassion isn't selfish. It's the foundation of every genuine connection. Think of a tree. Its roots don't apologize for drinking water before the branches bear fruit. In the same way, treating yourself with patience isn't indulgence, it's survival. The Stoics, often seen as stern, taught that self-respect is the bedrock of resilience. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, "Be kind to yourself first. Only then can you be of use to anyone else." Here's where modern life twists the truth. We mistake self-criticism for virtue, as if tearing ourselves down makes us wiser. The Buddha called this the second arrow, the pain we add to our suffering by judging it. Compassion isn't just for others. It's the quiet voice that says, "You're human, that's enough." Even Nietzsche, the philosopher of strength, warned against self-flagellation. He saw that those who despise their own flaws become merciless toward others. True empathy begins inward, when you stop seeing your struggles as failures and start recognizing them as part of the shared human story. Yet balance is key. The Taoists spoke of Wu Wei, effortless action. Not laziness, but the art of knowing when to push and when to rest. Self-compassion isn't surrender. It's the wisdom to say, "This is where I am today," without guilt or shame. And here's the ripple effect. When you stop punishing yourself for being imperfect, you stop demanding perfection from others. The 20th century psychologist Carl Rogers put it simply, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself as I am, then I can change." This is the forgotten art. Before you can hold space for another's pain, you must learn to hold your own. Not with pity, but with the same fierce tenderness you'd offer a friend. Because the world doesn't need more critics. It needs more people who've made peace with their own broken pieces. So start here. Look in the mirror and say the words you've been waiting to hear. Then watch how everything else, your love, your patience, your ability to understand, grows from that single, unshakable truth: you matter too. The ripple effect, how empathy transforms societies. Picture a single drop of water falling into a still pond. The ripples spread outward, touching everything in their path. This is empathy, not just a feeling, but a force that reshapes the world. When one person truly understands another, the impact doesn't stop there. It echoes through families, communities, even entire civilizations. History proves it. The abolition of slavery, the rise of civil rights, the end of apartheid. None of these movements began with laws or weapons. They started with people daring to say, "Your pain is my pain." The philosopher Adam Smith, famous for economics, wrote that society thrives not on self-interest alone, but on our ability to tremble with the sorrows of strangers. Without that, justice is just a word. But empathy isn't just for grand revolutions. It's in the small moments, too. The neighbor who listens, the stranger who stops to help. The 20th century philosopher Emmanuel Levinas argued that true morality begins when we see another's face and feel responsible for them. Not out of duty, but because their existence demands it. Here's the magic. Empathy is contagious. Studies show that when one person acts with kindness, others follow. Like a chain reaction, it builds trust, dissolves barriers, and turns enemies into allies. The ancient Chinese philosopher Mencius believed humans are born with an innate sense of compassion, a seed of goodness that, when nurtured, grows into a forest of connection. Yet there's a catch. Empathy alone isn't enough. Without action, it's just sentiment. The feminist philosopher Simone de Beauvoir warned that pity can be passive. A way to feel without doing real change requires more than tears. It demands courage, the willingness to stand beside someone and say, "I'll fight with you." And that's where the ripple becomes a wave. When empathy moves from the heart to the hands, it builds hospitals, ends wars, and mends broken systems. The utilitarian philosopher John Stuart Mill argued that the greatest good comes not from individual happiness, but from a society where no one's suffering is ignored. So here's the challenge. Don't just feel, act. Because every time you choose to understand, you don't just change one life, you change the world. The ripples never really stop. They just keep spreading long after you're gone. And that's how empathy rewrites history, not with a shout, but with a whisper. "I see you. And because of you, nothing will ever be the same." The final revelation: why empathy is humanity's greatest hope. We stand at a crossroads. The world pulls us in two directions, toward isolation or connection, division or unity. The choice we make now will shape the future. And the key to choosing wisely lies in something ancient yet urgent: empathy. This isn't about warm feelings or polite nods. Empathy is the quiet revolution that has toppled empires and rebuilt broken societies. It's the force that turns strangers into allies and wounds into wisdom. Without it, we're just voices shouting into the void. With it, we become architects of a world worth living in. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer called empathy the foundation of all morality. Not rules, not fear, but the simple act of recognizing that another's suffering matters as much as your own. He saw it as the antidote to selfishness, the bridge between me and we. But empathy isn't passive, it's a call to arms. The existentialist Albert Camus believed that true solidarity begins when we refuse to look away from another's pain. In a universe that often feels indifferent, empathy is our rebellion, a way to say, you are not alone. Here's the paradox. The more fractured the world becomes, the more empathy becomes our lifeline. The psychologist Carl Jung warned that denying our connection to others doesn't make us stronger. It makes us hollow. We thrive not by building walls, but by tearing them down, one act of understanding at a time. And the stakes couldn't be higher. Every war, every injustice, every broken system starts with a failure of empathy. But so does every act of courage, every moment of healing. The philosopher Martha Nussbaum argues that empathy isn't a luxury. It's the skill that lets us navigate a complex world without losing our humanity. This is the revelation. Empathy isn't just about making life kinder. It's about making it possible. Without it, trust crumbles, progress stalls, and hope flickers out. With it, we find the courage to face the darkest parts of history and the creativity to build something better. So here's the challenge. Don't just wait for change. Be the spark. Listen when it's easier to judge. Reach out when it's easier to turn away. Because the future isn't written yet. And every time you choose empathy, you rewrite the story. This is how we save the world. Not with grand gestures, but with the quiet, relentless belief that no one is disposable. That every life is a thread in the same vast tapestry, and that the simplest act of understanding can bend the arc of history toward light. The choice is yours. Will you be the wall or the bridge, the end or the beginning? The answer starts with a single step: seeing someone else, truly seeing them, and realizing they've been you all along.